Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 9 of Legends of Tomorrow called Left Behind. And in general, I thought this was a pretty okay episode. Not super, but certainly not a whole huge amount of things to complain about. So let's just kind of get right into things. Even though I just said that there's not a huge amount to complain about, let me complain about some stuff. The whole thing of like, oh, if you stay in this time period too long, you're going to start going native and all this. This totally feels like something that's just got pulled out of thin air. I can't remember ever hearing this in any DC comic story about time travel. I mean, this is like, what the hell? This is ridiculous. Um, and it just kind of, frankly, it seemed like a half-assed excuse as to why Sarah would so easily turn against the teams so that they could have that kind of fight sequence between Kendra and Sarah. It's like, okay, Hawk Girl versus White Canary, cool, but you've got to throw out this bullshit here in order to justify this, and this seems stupid. Um, Now I did like, but again, that was also done just so they could have a lot of cool stuff going on at Nanda Parbat. I mean, we got Hawk Girl versus White Canary. We could see Matt Nable as Ra's al Ghul again. I mean, we're introduced to Talia al Ghul. For a long time, the people behind Arrow had said, we haven't decided whether or not Talia even exists here in the Arrowverse. Well, here it is that she does, and well, over on Arrow, Nyssa recently dissolved the League of Assassins. So well, why was Nyssa the favored heir instead of Talia? Where is Talia? And, when Talia finds out about the League being dissolved, how is she going to react to that? I mean, this totally screams we're setting this up for a future season of Arrow. And, Nyssa versus Talia as part of an Arrow storyline in the future. Yeah, that sounds really cool. And, it's been very clear that the people behind Arrow really like having Katrina Law around. So, yeah. It's also certainly kind of cool to listen to Ray kind of like, oh man, I really don't want to be back here again. And Kronos go in there and just dirt stomp the League of Assassins. That was pretty cool as well. The only thing that seemed really odd about that whole situation is, just how Ra's al Ghul is like, oh yeah, you guys are totally from the future. I got it. And it's just like, okay, I get that he's Ra's al Ghul. He's lived a long time. He's seen a lot of crazy stuff, but even then, time travel seems like something that should phase him a little bit more. When you think about it, he's been around a really long time. And this is a time travel show. Who's to say this is the first time he's ever seen time travelers? Although, in all fairness, he did seem a little like, whoa, when it came to Firestorm. So he's probably never seen, a person with powers quite on that level before, but still. So might not be the first time Ra's al Ghul's seen time travelers. Let's just file that away for future reference. Now I did like that they took a moment to have Sarah say, "Okay, the League has kind of helped me get my bloodlust under control, which is good." But it sort of like, that sort of seems like something that should be more than like a throwaway line that a person could, miss if they'd stepped away, if they were like, adding ice to their drink or something. I don't know. It seems like unless they like specifically bring that up again, it's going to seem like they threw away put some really important information in a line that could easily be overlooked. Let's put it that way. Um, so I think that kind of covers everything that's on the Sarah side of things. Moving on to the whole Ray and Kendra thing. Um, Again, this whole going native thing. Uh, and honestly, that whole bit with Bill Gates' dad, that seemed pretty stupid. Um, but anyway, uh, having Kendra and Ray, kind of in this, you know, quote unquote marriage for all intents and purposes. Again, one has to point out that this would totally have been illegal in most of the United States in 1960. And I'm pretty double. I'd have to go and take a look. There's like a map I saw when I just did some checking on this the last time for the last episode, was show the places in America where it was legal. And this episode where Ray and Kendra were was set in Hub City, and in the comics and such, it's doing basically DC is usually pretty big on not explicitly naming states where these uh, fictional cities are. Now, there have been exceptions. For example, in the comics, Central City is in Missouri, and Keystone City is in Kansas. Opal City is in Maryland. And Hub City has more than once actually been stated to be in Missouri. And if you look at the little map when they zoom in, it's like they're like, "Hey, they're in Hub City." It's you only see it for a brief second, but it's pretty clear if you're familiar with the geography of the U.S. It's like, yeah, that looks like somewhere in Missouri. Um, it's kind of a little bit amused. I actually live not super far away from Missouri, even though I actually live in Illinois. Anyway, and of course, Hub City is best known as the home of the Question, which is pretty cool. I do like the Question a lot, especially the Justice League Unlimited version. There, he was immensely cool. But anyway, um, so this, of course, the first of all, they drop the Wave Rider down in this park where apparently Kendra and Ray are the only people. Now, it is mentioned by a certain someone later. Oh, there was a UFO in Hub City, and that's kind of what leads them to there. It was this like, you guys, maybe you should have flipped on the invisibility switch? And then there's this whole thing with, okay, Ray asking Kendra, is about to ask Kendra to marry him. Okay, cool. And they get back on the ship, and it's whole like, Ray is like, I don't know. I mean, I was really happy with my life there. And Kendra's all like, oh man, we get to go back to being on the whole time travel thing. This is awesome. And they both have justifiable reasons for feeling that way. And this sort of conflict between them is sort of like Ray's sort of sad to leave his old life. Kendra's pretty happy about it. I mean, it did make for some nice stuff, but again, it felt really rushed. I mean, this relationship does seem to have been moving kind of fast. Now, granted, they've had 2 years for this relationship to kind of grow off screen, but that's off screen. Off screen stuff, it's really hard to form some sort of emotional attachment as a viewer to stuff that happens off screen. Now, ultimately, Ray and Kendra reconcile. There's whole difference, and that's great. But I'm watching the scene at the end, and I'm just like, please tell me that they've not been living together for 2 years, and that this is the first time they've had sex. I mean, these are two attractive young people who are more than a little into each other, living together. It's like if there wasn't some banging going on this whole time, it's gonna be just almost ridiculous. I mean, seriously ridiculous. Uh, but anyway, moving on to the whole thing with Snart and Rory. Now, as soon as they said that Kronos had kidnapped Snart, that's when the gears started turning in my head. I mean, I knew we were going to see Mick again. Him being alive was no surprise at all. But I'm like, him being Kronos, okay, now that's genuinely a surprise. And it's actually really fitting because so far Mick's just basically been dumb, crazy muscle. That's all he really had going for him. But here he talks again. Vanishing Point is brought up, and he mentions like, "Oh, I got all this training from the Time Masters." Well, Mick's kicked up his game a notch, quite a few. I mean, Kronos has almost taken down the team a couple of times. So by doing this, it really makes Mick a much more dangerous person and a much richer character. He is no longer just dumb and crazy. So you have to wonder, what is his dynamic with Snart going to be from now on? And even though it was a little on the heavy-handed side, I definitely did like that scene at the end where the team, comes together and says, you know what, we're going to mix one of us. We're going to try and see if we can redeem him. And, a lot of points to Wentworth Miller here. Like, the whole thing with the escape scene where he has to, like, freeze off his own hand, that was really intense. And again, points to Dominic Purcell for what he did with Heatwave in this episode. I mean, that bit where he talks about, like, the great thing about being a time traveler is I can bring your sister here and kill her in front of you again and again and again. And Snart is just like, oh. And the thing is, though, that actually reminds me of something that they did in the comics. There was this bad guy, if you're familiar with the famous Kingdom Come story, called, and this is kind of the spin-off series from it, who basically, long story short, he's a time traveler. He absolutely despises Superman, and he is crazy powerful. So he decides, okay, he decides I'm gonna kill Superman, and he fights Superman. When Superman is an older guy, and wins. He succeeds in killing Superman. Then he time travels back to the next day, kills Superman again, and again and again and again, until he has literally time traveled through years and killed Superman thousands of times. And then it says, like, oh, the present Superman has to deal with the situation, and it was pretty intense. I'm like, whoa. I mean, I've seen a few stories in the comics where Superman got killed by somebody. There was one I found, like, this old comic from like the 70s or something, where he got killed by some space pirate, and his body fell to Earth, and then a bunch of he was like gonna have his organs implanted into Batman, and then Lex Luthor stole them. Yeah. Anyway, so, but anyway, that was a nice use of just how creepy and scary time travel could be there. And this whole thing where it wraps up with you know Rip saying, "Okay, we're gonna go to 2147 or something like that." Like, I always knew Vandal Savage was there. Well, why didn't we go there? Because I thought it was too dangerous. I was like, okay, man, you are gonna have to have one hell of an explanation for this. But okay, I guess we'll see. In any case, this was, not the greatest episode of the series so far, but for the most part, despite a few notable flaws, pretty good episode. And it definitely does establish some very interesting new status quos for a lot of the characters. What's going on with Mick is extremely interesting, and it's definitely nice to have the band back together. So, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.